Today I'm talking about one of my favorite shows, Superman.
Yay, Superman!
I am such a huge fan of the DCAU. Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, among others, set a benchmark in superhero animation that has not been achieved since. The mature themes throughout Batman, Superman, and the two Justice Leagues create shows that are just as engrossing for kids as they are for adults. I'm a testament to this. I didn't watch any of the DCAU shows during their heyday. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I stumbled upon Batman. Before that, I didn't really care much for superheroes. I hypocritically had the opinion, which I hate hearing now, that Superman is just too powerful. He's boring. Now, I'm no comic expert. I can't tell you how faithful they were to the source material, but I can tell you that Superman the Animated Series succeeded where so many others have failed, and wrote a compelling, relatable, modern character for one of the hardest superheroes to write for. So let's examine how Superman the Animated Series got Superman right. Let's start with what Superman represents. I have heard time and again that Superman represents hope. This is probably due to the 2002 birthright interpretation, which states Superman's S is the Kryptonian symbol for hope. This is also echoed in 2013's Man of Steel.
The symbol of the House of El means hope.
But that's a fairly new take. The S originally just stood for Superman, and another story has it being a snake representing healing. Superman has gone through so many different retellings, but I do not see hope as being a defining trait of his. Hope implies a desperate situation with an unlikely solution, a David v. Goliath conflict, in which prevailing requires a fortitude of faith. But Superman is Goliath. He's outmatched by few characters and rarely needs hope. There's a number of ways in which you could argue hope applies to Superman, so let me just go through them now. You could argue he offers hope to humanity. Well, hope for what? A better world? Superman doesn't try to change anything. He merely keeps the law in order. Hope against crime? Superman is never everywhere at once. Crimes still happen. Hope against otherworldly invasions. Hope here doesn't make sense preemptively. You can hope something never happens, but it may, and Superman doesn't control that. Hope that when something bad happens you have a fighting chance? You do. It's Superman, and you don't need a hope on that. It's a reality. I'd argue the most defining trait of Superman is order, and I see Superman the Animated Series adopting this. Superman represents this lawful good. He wants freedom and peace for all people.
I swear, all I ever wanted for them was peace, order, tranquility.
This explains why order gets toyed with so frequently, and the Superman dystopia comes up a lot. When Superman feels he has lost control, he does everything in his power to force the world back into order. In these stories, Superman isn't far from what we know him as. He's himself, just pushed too far. It makes sense that he could and would lean too far into order, and this would be the end result. Hope makes more sense for someone like Batman. He's your hope that he can clean up Gotham, make the town uncorrupted. He's trying to change things. Superman is just trying to keep Metropolis, this golden city, safe. And there is security in order, not hope. I think hope gets used because of the emotion that it conveys, which brings us to getting the aesthetic right. Hope conveys this bright, upbeat aura, just like the kind found in Superman, and this contrasts against the dark moodiness of Batman. When making the music for Superman the Animated Series, they actually describe it as being hopeful, as opposed to Batman's music. So once again, we have this idea of hope creeping in, and it begs another argument about the role that hope plays. Maybe it represents Superman's hope in people. Well, it can't be an aesthetic choice based upon mindset, because Batman has hope in people too. He's shown again and again trying to turn people back on the right path. The hopeful aesthetic has to do with what these superheroes want to represent. Batman wants to be feared, an image to criminals to beware. Superman wants to be accepted by humanity. He wants to show the citizens of Metropolis he will protect them. It is citizen-facing versus criminal-facing. These are the lenses through which our heroes tell their tale. It frames the world they live in, and thus needs representing aesthetically. Superman's world is bright and good, and he fights back the shadow of crime. Batman's world is dark and grim, and he's the shining beacon of hope. Superman the Animated Series understood this, and that's why a dark, gritty Metropolis just doesn't work. It turns Superman's lens into Batman's.
I don't want anyone thinking you're like that nut in Gotham City.
What drives an extremely powerful alien to do what he does? In the animated series, Superman's moral code is entirely derived from the Kents. He wants to live up to what they instilled in him, a country boy who believes in proper manners and good old justice. He's wholesome, but not completely over-the-top goody-goody like some iterations depict him. He has the normal desires and insecurities that you'd find in any human. He actually portrays more human aspects than the totally human Batman. Whereas Batman has learned to be cold and calculative, Superman embraces a lot of the sappy humanitarian attitudes.
What a dork.
This is not to say Superman is just out to do good. He's out to be the best version of himself as the Kents would have wanted, and this involves the Midwestern values he was raised with. Couple that with Superman's strong sense of order and duty, and he comes to this live to serve motto.
As leader, you serve the people. They don't serve you.
It's the motivation and backbone of his character. And if you were to make a movie and show that Superman acquires his purpose to protect humanity through a hologram left by his father, you create a really weird character. It becomes just Clark following orders without ever developing the motivations himself. Also, throwing these grand expectations on your son, who you've never met, will end up feeling like a burden for him. It's just much more intuitive if Clark gets his sense of duty and morals from the Kents. Usually with superheroes, the immediate conflict is their mortality. What if this villain kills them? But with Superman, you could say that mortality isn't really important, because death isn't the most compelling thing. This is often because he's depicted as indestructible. But even when he isn't, you know he's not going anywhere because of conventional storytelling. The most compelling aspect is Superman's moral resolve, and supervillains trying to get him to break that. Can Superman save everyone? And if he can't, will that emotionally break him? When he couldn't save Lois, he broke and lost all sense of purpose.
You were a casualty of that war, and I knew I had to stop it by whatever means possible.
The gripping drama is if Superman is going to fail himself, saving a school bus full of children and the couple who's drowning, all while being pummeled with lasers. Those are the nail-biting moments because if Superman cannot prevent the deaths of those around him, he will in essence fail. Superman will not work as a reckless, stop-bad-guy-at-all-costs hero. If he isn't concerned with serving the people and exhausting himself looking out for each individual life, then what's the real conflict? Winning the battle? But that's an uninspired, shallow image of what Superman is really about. He needs a conflict that shakes his moral resolve, whether that's failing to live up to his moral code or having to question whether he's even doing the right thing. And the animated series got this right. And if you do want to use mortality as part of a Superman drama, you gotta do something about those powers. The number one complaint with Superman is he's just too overpowered.
What is your problem with Superman?
Everything's just so darn easy for him.
And if Superman's moving planets, reversing time, then I also feel the same way.
You know how many people you annoyed with the back in time thing?
I can just fly the whole thing back to a locksmith.
No flying!
Not only is it bad for the audience, but it's terrible for the writers. The Superman animated series writers knew this, and for that reason made a calculated decision to downgrade the hero. They wanted him to be able to be killed. He can't breathe underwater or in space. He's vulnerable to the elements, and he struggles with even lifting a truck. They dialed his powers way back, and it allowed for entertaining conflicts, even ones that were just strength versus strength, because you thought he really might not be able to do it. The days of needing kryptonite to just hurt the man were over. Writing a good Superman is more than just focusing on the man himself, though. You need to do justice to two iconic characters as well. To have a good Superman, you need to have a good Lois Lane. It's such a devastating blow to the character if you do Lois wrong, because so much of his motivation revolves around her. Lois should never, never feel like an annoyance to the audience. If Lois annoys you, you're prone to start disliking Superman. In the DC cinematic universe, you're introduced to a Lois who is immediately in a situation over her head. She made a dumb choice, and if Superman didn't show up, she would have died. Then, immediately after he saves her life, you see her trying to expose Superman's real identity. She is shown as being arrogant, stubborn, and selfish.
Well, what can I say? I get writer's block if I'm not wearing a flak jacket. So if we're done measuring dicks?
I'm not a lady, I'm a journalist.
I'm a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter.
Then act like it.
This could have been endearing, but it's not, because it isn't acted that way. Usually that's doable through humor, or by being bossy and arrogant because you have something to prove. But it cannot be endearing with pretentiousness. Worse, it's pretentiousness coupled with constantly seeming fearful and meek. In the animated series, I love Lois. She's dominant, sassy, courageous, and a nice compliment to Clark's mild demeanor. They wanted her to be Clark's rival, so although she respects him, she is constantly teasing him, because in Lois's eyes, Clark is a bit of a weenie and too boring, which is great, because it calls out all the Boy Scout behaviors so the viewer doesn't have to.
What a dork.
This was illustrated so well in The World's Finest episode, when Lois falls for Bruce Wayne, the bad boy who takes anything he wants, all while Clark is seething with jealousy but also too much of a weenie to make a move. Lois is smart and capable, very much a character that gets stuff done. She moves the plot. And she was never entitled in the animated series. She always figured she could take care of herself. In fact, when Clark would offer her help, she'd give him a pat on the head with a "isn't that sweet, acting like you can help me." In the movies, she always counts on being saved. She expects it. This helpless, always needing to be saved plot device. It's annoying. I'm annoyed by her, and thus annoyed with Superman for caring about her. Luthor can have different interpretations that work, many more than Lois, but the one thing you have to do is have the audience understand and appreciate his motives. He's humanity's opposition to needing a protector. That cannot change. I for one completely understand the feelings behind not wanting an alien god deciding what you can or can't do without any means of doling out justice to him.
Well, an alien in my own backyard.
Once that is locked down, you can add in whatever spices suit you. Power-hungry businessman, tech genius, it's fine. Just make sure the audience understands his motives and can relate on some level. Lex in the animated series is fantastic. He considers Metropolis his city. He built it and he owns it. He thinks humanity is essentially going in whatever direction he decides. Superman then comes in and says, "This is my city now. I know what's right or wrong and you have to obey like everybody else." And that's a great rivalry. With Jesse Eisenberg, I don't really know what the hell was going on there.
Because that is paradoxical, and
I could watch the movie a few more times to try to work out exactly what he was going for, but regardless of what his motives were, he was just unrelatable and weird.
And knowledge is power. And I am... No, what am I? What was I saying? No.
Lex should be this powerful man that's kind of enviable. Shoot, he dated Lois Lane. He's supposed to be Clark Kent's social superior, or at least rival. But the movie just makes him this tweaked out nerd who is not cool, not suave, and instead seems like he probably has some mental issues. He seems crazy, and thus guilty, and the audience shouldn't even bother to try to consider his side. Superman should just beat him up. There doesn't get to be any philosophical arguments between whether humanity should or shouldn't let a Superman dictate their judicial system, because the one making the argument against it is the worst poster boy you could have. Lex works as being that top dog, genius businessman who is personable, able to capture people's support, and actually convince many that his way is the way to go. A leader who can actually turn the very people Superman is protecting against him through paranoia and shady politics. It's the perfect nemesis for Superman because public opinion is actually a crucial component of the Superman story. It's important, even in superhero fiction, to never forget these are extraordinary beings doing extraordinary things, and any figure that's different, especially to superhuman degrees, will elicit intense emotions. Differences make humans uneasy. No matter how progressive we think we've become as a species, we still have tribe-based little lizard brains. Even a figure so seemingly non-polarizing as Superman, in your fictional population, there still needs to be those distrustful of him because, well, he's an alien.
This Superman is nothing more than the world's strongest con man.
And the animated series plays with that concept, but they only add in enough to be realistic. If you learned about humanity through the DC cinematic universe, then the world is only full of fearful, hate-filled citizens. The military, the news, the people, all of them just displaying the worst behavior. Being dicks to Superman and or Clark Kent his whole life. It gives us no reason to root for humanity, or even fathom why he'd want to help them. It missed a crucial component, and that was the good among us. The animated series showed citizens who would stand up for him, cops expressing that they believe in what he's doing. We didn't get drowned out by the negative, the positive drowned out the hateful. It's an inspirational message about community and speaking up to protect those that are different than us, no matter how alien.
Superman! We love you, big guy!
Throughout writing this piece, I couldn't help but get more and more frustrated with what they're doing to my favorite characters on the big screen. Creativity is good, and if you have a new vision for how Lex should be, or you want to bring gritty realism to the DC universe, great. But there are fundamentals you can't write out. And if you're going to write them out, then just come up with your own superhero. These people are being given millions of dollars to produce a decent Superman movie, and they can't be bothered to do some proper research? Just learn the character, figure out what worked in past iterations, watch 10 seconds of the same documentary I did.
Superman is one of those characters, it's like you don't necessarily want to play him dark or gritty and angry and all the time, but he is kind of so inherently good that you need to kind of break that mold a little bit every now and then.
All that aside, though, Superman the Animated Series is a masterpiece. The whole DCAU is. They easily could have pumped out the same character from the 1978 movie or the 1993 TV show. Or they could have gone too far the other way, making him this dark, broody mess. But they understood who Superman was, and they found out how to play with that just enough to give us compelling stories, while also staying true to the character. Unfortunately, we didn't get that on the big screen. But that's okay. We always have the TV shows.